Welcome to the Midnight Narrator, where the darkness holds secrets and every story leaves a mark on your soul. Tonight, prepare yourself for a tale of moral ambiguity, forbidden witnessing, and an unsettling performance that defies all reason. This is The Witness's Burden, a story that questions the line between being an observer and becoming an accomplice. Let's step into the chilling unknown. Hit that subscribe button and let the story unfold. If you were to encounter me on the street and inquire about my occupation, I would offer the standard prefabricated response: remote market research analyst for a multinational data firm. It's a carefully constructed fiction, a bland and unremarkable cover story designed to deflect further inquiry. The truth, however, is far more unsettling, far more deeply disturbing. Every Wednesday evening, without fail, I meticulously prepare myself. I lay out my most respectable attire, a dark gray suit, a crisp white shirt, a muted tie, and ensure my shoes are polished to a mirror sheen. Then, as the evening shadows lengthen, I embark on a solitary drive to a secluded estate nestled deep within the county's rural heartland. The journey itself is always fraught with a growing sense of dread, a knot tightening in my stomach that refuses to dissipate. The long winding driveway, shrouded by ancient trees, leads to imposing wrought iron gates, where I present a coded card to a silent, uniformed guard whose face remains impassive, his eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses, even in the fading light. The gates creak open with a groan of aged metal, revealing a grand yet strangely sterile mansion bathed in an eerie, artificial glow. Inside, a hushed, almost oppressive atmosphere prevails. I'm met by another uniformed figure, who escorts me through silent corridors to a large, dimly lit hall. There I take my assigned seat in a plush yet uncomfortable chair, facing the imposing structure that dominates the far end of the room. And then I wait. And then I listen. That's the entirety of my role, the sum total of my responsibilities. A few hours each week and I receive a sum that would make most people envious. A figure that far exceeds any reasonable compensation for such a seemingly simple task. Generous benefits, ironclad confidentiality agreements, complete anonymity. It's a package that screams too good to be true. And as I've come to learn over these past 4 years, it is. Because the audio I'm compelled to audit is anything but ordinary. It is a chronicle of human suffering, a tapestry of fear, pain, and loss woven from the threads of countless unseen tragedies. I consider myself a moral person. I volunteer at the local animal shelter every other weekend, finding solace in the unconditional affection of the abandoned animals. I contribute regularly to various environmental charities, driven by a deep concern for the planet's future. I try, in my own quiet way, to live a life guided by ethical principles, to treat others with respect and compassion. I've never knowingly inflicted harm on another living being. So how, I often ask myself in the long, sleepless nights that follow these sessions, how can I be held accountable for simply listening? How can I be judged for being a witness to something I have no power to prevent? It began 4 years ago, during a period of intense financial strain. I was drowning in debt, facing the imminent threat of foreclosure, and desperate for any opportunity to salvage my crumbling life. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, came the offer. A cryptic message, an anonymous phone call, a vague description of a position requiring only attendance at weekly private sessions. I was told I'd be evaluating audio recordings, nothing more. Initially, I was deeply skeptical, bordering on outright suspicious. I had no background in acoustics, psychoacoustics, or any related field. My professional experience was in accounting, a world of spreadsheets and balance sheets, a far cry from the mysterious task that was being presented to me. But the recruiter's voice on the phone was smooth, reassuring, almost hypnotic. No specialized skills are necessary, he insisted, his voice a low, calming baritone. Your presence, your attention, is all that's required. You are there to audit. It reeked of a scam, some elaborate hoax designed to exploit the vulnerable. But the desperation gnawing at me, the fear of losing everything I'd worked for, overrode my better judgment. I imagined a high-pressure sales pitch, a multi-level marketing scheme, or some other harmless, if ultimately pointless, ruse. I told myself I could always walk away. The reality, as I soon discovered, was far more disturbing, far more insidious. The estate was immense, sprawling across hundreds of acres of secluded land. The high walls surrounding the property, topped with razor wire and monitored by security cameras, gave it the air of a fortress. The other attendees, all impeccably dressed in dark suits and elegant gowns, seemed equally uncomfortable, their faces etched with a mixture of apprehension and forced composure. I felt woefully underdressed in my best off-the-rack suit, acutely aware of the disparity between my modest attire and their obvious wealth. The entire property, I later learned, had been leased for these private gatherings. The sheer scale of the operation was staggering, a testament to the vast resources behind it. Who could possibly fund such an elaborate and secretive endeavor? What could possibly justify such an extravagant expenditure? The staff, all identical in their dark blue uniforms and unnerving mirrored visors that completely obscured their faces, moved with a robotic precision, their movements synchronized and eerily silent. They collected all electronic devices at the entrance, performing thorough security scans and pat-downs that felt intrusive and dehumanizing. We were instructed to remain seated throughout the session, maintain absolute silence, and focus our undivided attention on the audio emanating from the massive sound system that dominated the far end of the hall. No distractions, they repeated in monotone, almost synthesized voices, their words echoing through the silent hall. No diversions, no lapses in concentration. You are here to audit. A deep, primal unease settled over me, a feeling that something profoundly wrong, something deeply disturbing, was about to occur. The hall itself was vast and austere, devoid of any decoration or ornamentation. There were no windows, no visible exits, only the rows of plush yet strangely uncomfortable chairs facing the imposing sound system. It resembled a complex network of speakers, wires, amplifiers, and other unidentifiable components, all interconnected in a way that defied easy comprehension. Its sheer size and complexity hinted at a purpose far beyond simple audio playback, a purpose that filled me with a growing sense of dread. The nature of the audio recordings varied from week to week, each session offering a new and equally disturbing glimpse into the depths of human experience. Sometimes it was music, haunting melodies played on unfamiliar instruments, their tones filled with a profound sense of melancholy and loss. Other times it was spoken word, fragments of conversations in languages I didn't recognize, their intonations conveying a range of emotions from fear and desperation to resignation and despair. Occasionally, it was simply ambient sound, the rustling of leaves in a desolate forest, the crashing of waves against a rocky shore, the distant cries of animals in the night. That first night, however, it was a series of recorded conversations. Young voices filled with the carefree exuberance of youth discussed mundane details of their lives, school gossip, weekend plans, dreams for the future. The beginning was always the most bearable, the only time you could almost convince yourself that everything was normal, that you were simply attending a private listening session, a harmless exercise in audio evaluation. That first night, I found myself drawn into the light-hearted banter, almost forgetting the unsettling circumstances, almost believing that this was nothing more than a strange but ultimately benign assignment. But as the minutes stretched into what felt like hours, a persistent question began to plague me, a nagging doubt that refused to be silenced. How much time had actually passed? There were no clocks, no windows, and my watch, along with all other electronic devices, had been confiscated at the entrance. Time seemed to lose all meaning within those sterile walls, stretching and distorting in a way that disoriented me. Others in the audience began to exhibit subtle signs of unease. Whispers and furtive glances circulated among the attendees. Some shifted nervously in their seats, their hands fidgeting in their laps, while others stared blankly ahead, their faces pale and drawn, their eyes reflecting a growing sense of dread. The audio recordings themselves began to change, the light-hearted conversations gradually giving way to hushed arguments, then to rising voices filled with fear and desperation. Then, a voice, deep, resonant, and undeniably artificial, boomed through the hall, emanating from the massive sound system, its vibrations reverberating through the floor and up through my chair. Continue the audit. The sound system responded with a low, almost imperceptible vibration that seemed to resonate deep within my bones, a physical manifestation of the unseen power that controlled this place, a punishment for any lapse in attention, any momentary attempt to escape the horror we were forced to witness. It was a physical manifestation of the unseen power that held us captive, a constant, invisible tormentor that kept us tethered to the unfolding tragedy. The recorded voices, now trembling with terror, continued their desperate pleas, their cries echoing through the hall. As the session wore on, the atmosphere became almost unbearable, a suffocating weight of dread and despair. One of the recorded voices faltered, breaking down into heart-wrenching sobs, a sound that tore at my soul. The sound system reacted instantly. A high-pitched frequency almost beyond the range of human hearing pierced the air, a sound that bypassed my ears and seemed to bore directly into my skull, a searing sensation that felt like needles piercing my eardrums. I clamped my hands over my ears, squeezing my eyes shut, but the pain persisted. A constant, agonizing reminder of my obligation, my enforced participation in this macabre ritual. It was a physical manifestation of the unseen power that held us captive, a punishment for any lapse in attention, any momentary attempt to escape the horror we were forced to witness. The resonant voice, cold and emotionless, repeated its chilling command, its words echoing through the hall like a death knell. Continue the audit. The remaining recorded voices, now barely whispers of terror, continued their agonizing descent into despair, their cries growing weaker, their pleas becoming more desperate. The audio painted a vivid picture of unseen suffering, a tableau of human misery that unfolded in the darkness beyond the walls of this sterile hall. The audio quality was unnervingly clear, almost too perfect. There was a distinct lack of background noise, no ambient sounds of traffic or wind, or even the subtle hum of electrical equipment. It was as if the recordings were made in a vacuum, or perhaps even in some other place. I overheard two of the staff speaking once, their voices hushed and urgent. One said something about containment protocols and psychic resonance, words that chilled me to the bone. They pleaded with unseen figures, their voices cracking with anguish, begging for mercy, for release from their torment. They recounted their lives, their hopes, their regrets, their words filled with a desperate longing for a past that could never be reclaimed. They cried out for their loved ones, their voices breaking with the weight of their despair. But the unseen figures remained silent, their presence only implied by the reactions of the recorded voices, and we, the auditors, were bound by our role, forced to listen to every agonizing detail, every heart-wrenching cry. I noticed one woman in the row ahead of me constantly fidgeting with a rosary, her lips moving in silent prayer. Another attendee, a man with neatly trimmed gray hair, stared blankly ahead with tears streaming down his face, completely unresponsive to the world around him. Yet another occasionally scribbled notes in a small leather-bound notebook, as if trying to document the unfolding horror. One by one, the recorded voices fell silent, their cries fading into choked sobs, then into an echoing silence that was even more terrifying than their screams. The silence stretched on, broken only by the low hum of the sound system and the pounding of my own heart, a constant reminder of the horror I had just witnessed. As the final voice disappeared, leaving behind only the oppressive silence, a wave of complex and conflicting emotions swept through the hall. Some attendees wept openly, their bodies shaking with uncontrollable sobs. Others sat in stunned silence, their faces pale and drawn, their eyes fixed on some unseen point in the distance. Still others erupted in nervous, almost hysterical laughter, a desperate attempt to release the unbearable tension that had been building within them for hours. I myself felt a strange mixture of numbness and revulsion, a deep-seated feeling of guilt and complicity that I knew would haunt me long after I left this place. We filed out of the mansion in a daze, our movements slow and deliberate, our faces etched with the weight of what we had just experienced. The staff, their mirrored visors reflecting nothing but our own haunted faces, thanked us for our participation, their voices devoid of any warmth or emotion. Outside, the world seemed jarringly normal, the stars shining brightly in the clear night sky, the cool night air a stark contrast to the oppressive atmosphere within the mansion. Only a few hours had officially passed, according to the clock on my car's dashboard, despite the apparent eternity we had endured within those sterile walls. I tried on several occasions in the days and weeks that followed to explain what I had experienced, to find some outlet for the horror that now resided within me, a constant gnawing presence in the back of my mind. But no one believed me. They dismissed my accounts as nightmares, stress-induced hallucinations, or elaborate fabrications, their eyes filled with pity or disbelief. I learned to keep my silence, to bury the memories deep within myself, where they could fester and grow. I swore I'd never return. I told myself that I would find another way, that I would endure any hardship rather than subject myself to such torment again. But the crushing weight of debt, the constant fear of losing everything I'd worked for, the desperate need to provide for my family, forced my hand. And with each subsequent session, the horror became not easier, but more compartmentalized, more detached. I learned to build walls around my emotions, to distance myself from the suffering I was forced to witness, to become a passive observer in the truest sense of the word. The audio changes from week to week. The voices are always different, the languages vary, but the underlying theme remains the same. The suffering is constant, the despair unwavering, the sense of hopelessness pervasive. I tell myself I'm not responsible. I'm just an auditor, a passive observer, a mere conduit for these unseen tragedies. But the question continues to haunt me, a persistent whisper in the back of my mind. Is listening to such profound suffering any less a violation than inflicting it? And wouldn't it be far worse if no one heard? If their cries went unheard, unacknowledged, lost forever in the vast emptiness of the universe? After all, someone has to audit. And that concludes tonight's haunting tale, The Witness's Burden, a story of horror, complicit silence, and the irreversible cost of watching. Were you able to endure it, or did it break you as it did the performers? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you can stomach the darkness, make sure to like, subscribe, and tap the notification bell so you never miss another story. This is the Midnight Narrator signing off. Until next time, remember, sometimes the burden of witnessing is the heaviest weight we carry.